Alrighty, hello everybody. Hi and welcome to Columbia State Historic Park. Today we are inside our stagecoach office. My name is Kaitlyn. I am going to be your tour guide today. I am one of our interpretive park aides here at Columbia. And since this normally would be one of the busiest times of the year for us here in Columbia, we would normally have hundreds of people coming to see our tours during this time. Instead, in an effort to help everybody keep flattening the curve by staying home, washing your hands regularly, avoiding gathering in large groups, we're going to be bringing Columbia out to you. So today during my tour, I've got my moderator right here with me. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to pop them into the comments below, and she will let me know, and I can answer any questions that I possibly can. You can also leave comments if you're watching this in the past, and if possible, we'll try to go back through the comments and answer as many as we can. So today, what I'm going to be talking about is the incredible journey that people took in order to come here to California during the gold rush. They faced unimaginable odds in order to chase this vague promise that people had of making their fortune out finding gold in California. But before we go into a lot of detail onto what that journey was really like, I want everyone to be able to get themselves into the mindset of the kind of people who are most compelled to travel to California during this time. So we are in the year 1850. It's the same year that Columbia was founded. It's the same year that California became a state. And gold fever is in the air all across the world. And 1850 is a very difficult, it's a very tumultuous time for everyone. No matter where you are in the world, there is something happening, which means your lot in life is not exactly everything you wished it would have been. If you are in Europe, if you are in the countries of France or Ireland or Germany, your countries are suffering from famine as crop failures basically race across the nations. You don't have enough to eat. There are revolutions which are popping up in major cities like Paris and Berlin as major political and economical speakers. People like Karl Marx are encouraging these disenfranchised working classes, people who had been radically affected by economic crises just a couple of years before, in 1846 and 1847, an economic crisis which had devastated their lives. The entire countries are primed for revolt, for going out into the streets and rioting against the lot that they have been given in life. And of course, as you can imagine, this worried a number of people who did not want people on the streets rioting. And so often a lot of these countries, as well as elsewhere in the United States, they were advertising for immigration into California. They were advertising in hopes that people would leave. And to the point that they would actually make things called adventure companies. Now, adventure companies did something where they would guarantee, they would pay for your travel to California and give you a 3-year contract in order, a guaranteed job to work in the California gold fields. And that appealed to a lot of people in very uncertain times. Elsewhere in the world, if you're in Chile, you have the Peru-Bolivia Confederation Wars hanging over you. The terror of it is invading your personal life. If you're in China, you have an enormous amount of tumultuous things going on. You had just lost the Opium Wars against Europe, and you have had your country go through a lot of very rapid trade sanctions that were limiting your economic ability with other nations. You have, in southern China, you have civil war, you have religious revolution and upheaval, and you also have these famines, which were striking elsewhere in Europe at the time, were also striking in China. And on top of that, you have all kinds of other things happening. There's high inflation, there's high taxes, there's a lack of lands for the people in rural areas to claim for their owns. There's corruption in the ruling class, And if you go and see the public works, they aren't being funded. The military has been privatized. If you are in China, you do not feel comfortable with where you are. And for places like China and other places in the world during this time where things were very uncertain, hearing the promise of gold in California, hearing the promise of your fortunes was very appealing. And there was this overwhelming sense that people could come to California, get rich, and then go home. So unlike other places like New York or San Francisco, where there's this narrative of people coming in order to be a melting pot, to come and settle and mix their cultures, the gold fields in California aren't quite like that. A lot of people come here fully planning to, once they have made their fortunes, go back home. So a lot of the time they will travel and then end up settling in places with people of the same nationality or of the same ethnicities, which is how you get places, even on the map today, places like French camp and Chinese camp. So I want you all to imagine what it would be like to be one of these immigrants coming from elsewhere in the world. Are you here to get rich and go home? Are you here to grab your fortune and then bring it back and improve the life of everyone that you had left behind? Or are you here coming to California to settle, to make a home in this place which you had never heard of and had never seen before? Well, whatever your motivation, the first thing you would do before doing this journey is the exact same, and that would be to write a letter to every single person you know, all of your friends, all of your family, and it would be an incredibly heartfelt goodbye, because both you and they would never know if you would ever come back home. Even if you did come back home, it would not be for many years, and you might not come back home at all, because this was an incredibly deadly journey coming here to California, and many people did not make it. So, as we start considering this journey, I want everybody who's watching to be thinking, what would you want to bring with you, knowing that this journey was so dangerous? And for that matter, how are you going to get here? Well, if you're going to get here, I mean, how do people get to Columbia today? They drive here in cars, they might fly over here in planes. Now, of course, there's no cars or planes in 1850. Of course not, right? There's no buses that are coming up here with tour groups in 1850. But there's also no roads. There are trails. There are foot trails, which you can see here. Just little trails along cliff sides and cut out of the earth and across the plains. There are no bridges. And so if you come across a river or a ravine, and what are you traveling in? You are traveling in something like a wagon, whether it's a stagecoach wagon, like the one you can see behind me, whether it's a freight wagon or a covered wagon, or a mule train. You would be relying on things like live animals, things like horses and mules, and especially oxen, because you are having to haul an enormous amount of supplies with you. And if you got to these rivers or these ravines, what you would have to do is either ford the river, which means you would have to take your live animals and all of your supplies and float it across. If you come to a ravine, you have to make a winch and pulley system to take those live animals and all of your tons of supplies and your wagon and lower it inch by inch down to the bottom of the ravine, and then take it to the other side and then do the exact same thing in reverse. Pull those live animals and all those supplies back up all the way to the other end. Same thing happens for any uneven terrain. How do you get over a mountain when there's no roads? You have a winch and pulley system. It is an incredibly difficult road, and people came across all kinds of difficult terrain, as well as numerous diseases, unpleasant wildlife. Knowing that you had this enormous journey before you, what are some things you might want to have brought with you? What are the most important things someone traveling to California during the gold rush would have in order to help them on this journey? Got any suggestions in the comments? No? Well, frequently what we hear a lot of is stuff like guns. Yeah, guns are very useful. And actually, I have an example here of what a miner might have brought with them in their personal luggage on this journey to California. So in here, we see all kinds of things. We see tools, obviously. We see pickaxes and shovels. Now, a lot of the time, miners actually wouldn't bring tools with them. For one thing, they might not have ever mined before in their lives. They didn't necessarily know what tools they needed to bring with them. For a second thing, tools are really heavy. And so not only are you having to bring all of your supplies, but you may... Hello again, sorry about that. We had some technical difficulties, but I'm back. So I was in the midst of talking about travel routes here to Colombia. So one of the things you have to keep in mind is that there are multiple ways that people can come here to California. So one of them is by land. And if you're going by the land route, you're probably starting around in New York. And then you are taking your wagon or your buggy or your freight carriage, and you are going all the way up either the Southern Trail or the trail which we're concerned with, which is going to be the California-Oregon Trail. And that is a journey which will take anywhere between 6 to 8 months. And the other way that you can come, if you're not coming along the land trail, is by sea. Now there are 2 sea routes. The first one, you're stopping in more or less the same area. You're either coming off from London or you're coming from New York. And you are going to go all the way around America, all the way around South America, around the Great Horn of South America, and then all the way back up and then land in the port of San Francisco. And that would have been somewhere around 6 months. So it could be a little bit shorter, might be a little bit easier, but it's also just as dangerous. The other route is a bit of a shortcut. So you'd start in the same place around New York or in San Francisco, and, in New York or in London, and you would come in, and there's a little narrow little bit of land in between North and South America, in what is today Panama. Now today, in that area, we have the Panama Canal, which is an incredibly long man-made canal which stretches from one end all the way to the next so that ships can come through. Now in 1850, there's no Panama Canal yet. What you have instead is the Panama Isthmus. So if you land in the Panama Isthmus after your sea journey, what you have to do is hike through miles and miles of jungle. And then you arrive with your party on the other end, and you are praying and waving, hoping that a ship will come and pick you up, because there's no way to guarantee that a ship will be there on the other side and willing to pick you up. You just have to hope that one of those ships will take the chance to pick you up as they see you, because otherwise you're not sure if your party might survive until the next one comes along. Now, having that information, what are probably the most important things that you think people would have wanted to be bringing with them here to the California Gold Rush? So I had started talking about this before when we had our technical difficulties, and we have an example here of one of the personal luggage might look like for a miner in 1850. And you can see a whole bunch of those things here. One of those things is tools. Now, a lot of miners didn't bring tools with them because tools are really heavy. And in your wagon, you had to make sure that every ounce of weight you had needed to be there, because it was being pulled by your animals. And if your animals were overworked, if they stopped in the center of the country and you couldn't go any further, you were stuck. And so you took very good care of them. And the most thing that was probably important was you had to have 6 to 8 months of provisions. You had to have sources of provisions and of clean water. Other things that people might have here is things like survival tools. So things like knives, things like camping supplies, things that would allow them to make up camp at night, as well as changes of clothes, as well as sources of entertainment. So things like pipes, as well as playing cards. If you had children with you, children would have their toys, as well as anything that would make your life a little bit easier during this incredibly difficult journey. Now, a little bit later on in the period, you start having people come to California for different reasons. They're not just here to be as miners, they're here as merchants, or they're here to start homesteads. And what they brought with them would look a little bit different. Very often, what you are going to see people start to bring with them for different purposes are their nicest clothing to show how prosperous they are, especially if you are there to start a business as a merchant. You want to be able to show off that you were perspiring, that you were having a very profitable business, that you were doing well for yourself. Here we have an example of what a merchant's luggage might look like. You can see they have very nice clothes, they might have goods with them, things to show off that, yes, this is a reputable person to do business with. And all of these things that people brought with them was very important, because by the time that all of these people arrived here in Columbia and other gold rush towns like Columbia, their work was certainly cut out for them, getting any of that fortune that they were promised. And to wit, also building the town that you see today. That is just about everything that I have for you all today. Again, my name is Kaitlyn. This has been the Stagecoach office in Columbia State Historic Park. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you all had a great time today.